Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to our part two of our brain health series this month. I am joined again by my amazing co-host here, Dr. Don Verhulst, who is a medical doctor. And I shared with you last week his background and what he's been involved in for over 40 plus years with not the medical side, the allopathic side, but how he's chose to dive into nutraceuticals and being able to formulate products and be in the forefront of leading companies with cutting edge products. And I think Dr. Don, this one takes the cake for you. You and I have personally known each other for 15 years. I have learned so much from you over the years, but we are learning this one together. We are definitely learning LifeWave together. And so we're going to, like I said, dive into the brain health component again tonight for you and really talk about some neurodegenerative types of issues that people deal with. But before I do want to share with you our disclaimer. The information that we are sharing tonight is for informational purposes. Dr. Don is not your medical doctor. I am not your medical doctor. I'm not a medical doctor, right? I have a PhD in integrative medicine and a PhD in functional medicine. So I hang out in the holistic world over here with Dr. Don. But we want you to make sure that if you have any questions about your health, please check with your healthcare practitioner or your doctor if you're pregnant or nursing, or if you're on medications, or, if you're any concerns at all. We're not intending to treat, cure, prevent, or diagnose anything that's going on with you. And so with that, Dr. Don, let's get started and I'll get our PowerPoint ready here. So how would you like to kick us off tonight?
I'd like to kick us off by saying thank you for your generous introduction there and your perceptiveness as always. And that, yes, you and I have seen some things. We've been around the block. It's not our first rodeo. And we have never seen anything like this. This technology truly is a paradigm shift in what I'm going to call anti-aging science. And what more important organ to reverse aging in than your brain? I mean, if everything else is working right in your life, in every other arena, your finances, your relationships, and all those things, but your brain's not working right, that's not good. Mm-hmm. So it's a prioritizing organ, so prioritizing, in fact, that although it's only a few pounds out of your 150 or so, just a few percent, it takes 25% of the body's energy in the form of oxygen. Why? Because there's a high priority on your ability to think and function. The brain controls the body. So it's so important to have your brain function in the perfection it was created to function in, to protect it against damage, number one, which is, your skull does that from physical damage. But there's lots of other things protecting constantly and consistently, but also to help it regenerate, to help it restore and renew, which we didn't even think was possible just a few years ago. When I got out of medical school 40 years ago, they told us you're born with all your brain cells and then you lose 10,000 a day, but no big deal because that doesn't amount to anything until you get to be about 65. And then it piles up enough to give you presenile dementia. That was neuroscience then. Well, neuroscience now has found out that is not true at all. You always make neurons. You're making new brain cells. You're making new connections. That's how you think. And there are many things we can do to preserve brain function and to enhance brain function. That's what tonight is all about. And I'm very excited to be here with you once again. Thank you, Dr. Stacy.
You are welcome, Dr. Don. All right, let me screen share here with our PowerPoints. We are going to take a look at GHKCU and brain health. So last week we kicked off by talking about some of the benefits of GHK on the brain. And I would love to go over these again with you, not all of them, of course, but highlight on some of the key things so that we remember the importance of this peptide.
Yeah, there's so much on this screen here. Even if we took the whole hour tonight and went over this screen, it'd be very valuable. And there's plenty here to do that with. But a couple of things that are just so important. I didn't want to just breeze over them in case some people didn't get to hear last week, or even if you did, you
Mhm.
know, God has set me free from the fear of repetition because that's how I learn. That's how you learn. In fact, we call it cabling in your brain. When you go over something, that's how you memorize it. That's how you learn it. So we're going to hit on a few topics that we've already talked about, but just, the very first thing, reducing inflammation. Inflammation is an enemy of your health, but particularly of your brain cells, because when inflammation is chronic, it can cause damage, free radical damage that ages the brain. And then that ties right in with the second one, improving memory. Uh, and these are all, of course, benefits of GHK copper peptide. This is well researched. These things are not on trial. We know what GHK copper peptide does in other parts of the body as well. I mean, it's very skin healthy. It supports fibroblasts, making collagen and other things. But tonight we're focusing on the brain. And then another one, we didn't talk about this last week, Dr. Stacy, but enzymes involved in neurotransmitter synthesis. Let me tell you what neurotransmitters are. They're little packages that help you think, that help you feel. They create emotions. They can be painkillers. They can be sensation sensors, so you feel things or you don't feel things. It's so important, neurotransmitters. I mean, the endorphins are the feel-good neurotransmitters. How many like to have more of those than the feel-bad neurotransmitters? How many like to have balance in that area? Well, GHK copper supports enzymes involved in making these little packages that help you to think properly. So just a number of those things. And then, of course, just basically protecting against free radical damage, which causes aging and nerve growth. We didn't talk about that, but we need to. We could spend a lot of time talking about it. Every nerve cell has an axon, AXON, and it means sends information away from the nerve. Then at the other end of the nerve, there's dendrites, and those are the receivers, little fingers that receive from other axons. So your brain is a series of these billions of cells that are receiving and sending information to one another. And it's the pattern in which they do that that creates a thought. Every thought makes a tree. And I'll tell you, if you knew just what was involved in the thought of, I love you, I say that, and we just say, okay, we know what that means, that thought. There are so many neurotransmitters involved, and steps, and pathways, and axons, and dendrites, millions of biochemical reactions that it takes just to say, I love you, or to hear, I love you, or higher than that, understand what it means. It's powerful. And your brain does it automatically. We don't think of these things every day, but they're going on. And they only go on if you're giving the brain proper nutrients in the form of blood flow to the brain, if you're protecting against damage and keeping things in balance. So it makes a big difference. Even some of the simple things like learning to relax. Stress is hard on your brain. It ages your brain. Getting to bed on time. If you don't sleep enough, your brain's not going to function. The hippocampus, where short-term memory is formed, doesn't get uploaded into the cerebrum, where long-term memory is preserved, if you don't sleep right. So you got to sleep right. And exercise increases blood flow and nutrients to the brain. If you're sedentary, your brain's not going to work as well as if you're taking a good walk 3 to 5 times a week. Fresh air, oxygen is a friend to your brain. Every cell needs oxygen. Sunshine helps balance things. This very process that we talk about is just exactly the sun hitting your body and changing it. Photobiomodulation, light therapy. That's what patches are all about. That's what signals this GHK copper peptide to do all the things that we've talked about already that it does. And so I won't keep you on this slide any longer, Dr. Stacy. I know you're chomping at the bit to get at tonight's slides, but there's so much powerful
I
information.
know.
If we just
I
had,
am.
yeah, if we
I
just
am,
had,
but I want to say one thing though before we move on,
yeah,
Dr. Don, because this is, for me, this is a big deal. Oh, that's a big deal. But when you look at the brain relies on antioxidants, blood-brain barrier blocks
yes,
most of them.
yes.
But GHKCU can cross the blood-brain barrier. And I don't know if people even know what the blood-brain barrier is, let alone the importance of something that can cross it to benefit the brain.
Right. Blood-brain barrier is something so important because the brain is so important. It is super protected, not only with a cranium, a hard shell, the hardest shell in the body to protect it from an even round shape of the skull so that blows would glance off it. It's very protected, but it's protected on a cellular level. You can't even get into the brain itself unless you're a certain size molecule. Big stuff can't get in. That's to keep toxins out and damaging substances out. That's what the blood-brain barrier refers to. But certain things can get in, and I'm so thankful that one of those is GHK copper peptide. GHK copper peptide is a tripeptide. That means it's only 3 amino acids. Most proteins are many more than that, hundreds, thousands in some. Collagen is a protein just with many dozens of amino acids that would never pass the blood-brain barrier. But GHK copper peptide does, so it can go in there and do its protective business that it was created to do, along with a number of other things. So I'm glad you brought that one up, because you can have a great brain, but if you don't protect it, it's not going to stay great for long. We want to protect our brains both physically with our skull and biologically by keeping bad chemicals out and allowing protective chemicals to come in.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree with that. Thank you for that explanation. All right, so here's our next page. I know there's a couple things you said you wanted to go over on here with also some other benefits of elevating GHK.
Yeah, so many things on this page too, but one that I want to emphasize is to stimulate nerve growth factor. It's NGF, stands for nerve growth factor. That's a protein that helps neurons mature. It helps neurons to develop and grow. And this is how thinking works in your brain, by different cells connecting with other cells, growing a neural pathway and network. That's how you learn new things. That's how you remember old things. So anything you can do to enhance NGF, nerve growth factor, is going to be brain positive. Well, guess what? The top one here on GHK copper peptide is it stimulates nerve growth factor. How many would rather have your nerve growth factor stimulated than not stimulated? I would. I like a strong brain. So that's extremely important. And then neuroprotection is what we've been talking about with that crossing the blood-brain barrier and helping to protect from free radical damage. But specifically here, it's shown to help by promoting the growth and survival of neurons. There's certain things that promote neurons sticking around. You want good neurons that are connected strong to other ones for a good, strong thought to stay for a long time. And if you don't support that, then they degenerate. And that's why we're going to get into that today on some of our specifics on our other slides on degenerative process of the brain, which is something we're fighting all the time. And degenerative diseases of the brain are things like Alzheimer's and presenile dementia and memory loss, especially short-term memory, which is the first thing to go. And of course, as you said, we're not talking about treating or curing any of these things, but we want to avoid them as much as we can. And we do that by getting to bed on time, by dealing with stress, by exercising, by fresh air and sunshine, and eating properly. God-made foods, not man-made foods, particularly sugar, which is particularly poisonous for your body and brain. So we do all those natural things, staying hydrated. But we also want to have enough GHK copper peptide on board, which is the subject of our discussion tonight, and we're going back on some of what we talked about last time. How about 408 genes upregulated, 230 genes downregulated by GHK copper peptide? What's that mean?
That's huge. That's why I was like, oh, talk about that one. Talk about that one.
That's a good one. That one, when you upregulate a gene, it's a good gene. You want it to be expressed. But bad genes, you don't want to upregulate those and express them. You want to shut them down. You want to downregulate those. So GHK copper peptide is smart. It upregulates productive genes that help things like memory and brain function, and then downregulates things that cause problems in the brain. That's 408 genes getting better, good genes being expressed, and 230 of the bad ones not being expressed. That may be your problem. It may be somebody's problem. They just have too many bad genes being expressed. Well, let's shut them down. Well, yeah. Well, how do we do that? GHK copper peptide. Well, what about if I just don't have enough expression of good brain genes? Well, how do I do that? I have 408 of them you can upload, you can express with GHK copper peptide. So, and then look, there's two words in one of them: modulate neurotransmitters. Wow. Neurotransmitters are the information packages that talk from one brain to another that control your mood, your memory, your feelings, your satisfaction or lack thereof. These are important little packages. The endorphins we talked about earlier, those are the natural painkillers. You have a pharmacy in your brain that can help you to fight depression, to upregulate things that will make you feel better, that will fight pain. And I don't know about you, I tried depression, I didn't like it. I want to be happy. I want that serotonin moving strong, that balanced, feel-good neurotransmitter. And I want endorphins flowing so I'm not full of pain. I can fight pain in my own body, released by my brain, neurotransmitters. How do we modulate neurotransmitters? I'm glad you asked. Make sure you got enough GHK copper peptide on board. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this one: promoting collagen and tissue repair. Well, that's important for skin, right? When you talk about collagen, yes, but we're talking about brain too. Brain cells need to be supported, and they're supported by collagen fibers that help with brain health, maintaining the integrity of blood vessels that supply the nutrients to the brain cells themselves, and then allow things to go through that blood-brain barrier. So promoting collagen and tissue repair. What another huge benefit of GHK copper peptide. The more you study this, the more you read this, the more you're not going to miss a day of allowing your own body to wake up what it takes with this wearable light therapy and enhance this signaling molecule, this miraculous molecule you were designed with called GHK copper peptide. The science is here. You can do it without interfering with pharmaceuticals or over-the-counter medications, and you don't even have to know what's going on in the brain. It's smart technology. It goes and repairs and restores and rebuilds. Wow, I don't want to miss GHK copper peptide, not for a moment in my brain, Dr. Stacy.
Mine either, Dr. Don. So let's talk just real quickly what neurodegeneration is before we share with them some PubMed studies.
Yes. Well, neurodegeneration is exactly what it sounds like. Neuro means brain, and degeneration means breaking down. And that's a part of life. Your brain is going to break down. And there is a natural anabolism, catabolism. Those are kind of fancy words, but we want to strike a balance between those two things. And anabolism is building up, bringing nutrients, making new brain cells. That nerve growth factor would be an anabolic factor that we talked about earlier. But we also do need brain catabolism, which breaks down some of the cells so they can be replaced and restored with new ones. It's part of the process. But what we want is a balance between this anabolism building up, this catabolism breaking down. It is called homeostasis. And that's what brain balance is all about. That's what balanced health is all about. And when it gets out of whack, you can break down more than you're building up, and that tends toward degeneration. It's the degenerative diseases that do that. The degenerative diseases are the classic killers: cancer, heart disease, diabetes, arthritis, autoimmune diseases. These are all degenerative. The diseases of aging. That's what, in this case, neurodegeneration is the degeneration of the brain. And it's the reason that people's brains get old and they suffer things like presenile dementia, Alzheimer's, memory loss. But now think of this. Everybody doesn't get that. Mm-hmm. You say, well, no, wait a minute, isn't that inevitable? You're going to age and you're going to have some of those things. No, there are people 100 years old that do not have short-term memory deficit, do not have presenile dementia, do not have Alzheimer's. Well, wait a minute. If that's the case, then it's not inevitable. And now we've learned some things in science, so many things that we can do. And I know I'm a broken record here, and I'm doing it on purpose. I'm repeating myself, not because I have presenile dementia or Alzheimer's, but because I want you to learn this. Learning to relax, dealing with stress, getting to bed on time, consistent exercise, fresh air, sunshine, eating God-made foods, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, real foods. If we don't start eating real foods, we're going to be in real trouble. And then drinking what you're mostly made of, water. You need to stay hydrated. Brain cells need to be hydrated for a couple reasons. The cells themselves need the hydration so they can function properly, dissolving the right chemicals and different things. But also hydration is probably more important because blood is mostly water, hydration, and you need blood flow to your brain to keep the nutrients coming. And so you just got to stay hydrated. All those things are important. Now we can take advantage of all those things, and we know some ways that we can also enhance it by increasing our GHK copper peptide, which protects against neurodegeneration, Dr. Stacy.
Absolutely. And look at this. So, we love PubMed, right? People like a little research, and you can see this is back from 2012. So this is not in the 2020 fiasco or anything like that. So we're looking at this clinical study here that was done using GHK in prevention of oxidative stress and degenerative diseases conditions for cognitive health.
Yes, so, and this is not LifeWave, Dr. Stacy. I know you know that, but maybe other people watching haven't looked at PubMed and don't know what the National Library of Medicine is. That's not LifeWave.
No, look, you can see. I just typed in GHK and cognition right up there at the top.
Right, but this is accepted science around the world. This is not a study done by LifeWave to try to promote what we can increase, this signaling molecule GHK copper peptide that we enhance with our patches. This is not by LifeWave. This is PubMed. This is accepted science that all scientists refer to. It's the standard. It's the bearer of knowledge. And here it is, National Library of Medicine telling you point blank, this tripeptide, 3 amino acid, GHK copper, prevents oxidative stress and degenerative conditions. We already said what the degenerative conditions of the brain can be. There's many of them, such as Alzheimer's, such as presenile dementia, memory loss. Those are probably the biggest major ones. And then the implications for cognitive health. Cognitive health just means how sharp you are, how quick you are, how much better your life is when you understand things, when you get with the program. I'll give you a great example of this, just in the natural, how important it is for your brain for you to have cognitive health. We have to sleep at night so our brain can rest and restore all these neurotransmitters and get things back into balance. If you go without sleep for 2-3 nights, let me tell you something, you are not a happy camper. You're ornery, you feel terrible. We've all done that, even when we just don't sleep our 6 to 8 hours or whatever you require. And that can be different for different people. Some people really only require 4 to 6 hours. It's a little more rare, but it happens. But even in one night not getting enough, you just don't feel right the next day. You overeat, you're irritable, and you just don't feel right. And something as simple as that, how much sleep you get, can be implicated in that. And now we've found that for cognitive health, you can enhance GHK copper peptide levels and help balance these neurotransmitters, balance this growth factor, neurologic growth factor in the brain, balance the talking together of nerve cells to one another. And here it is, right at PubMed. And then prevention of oxidative stress. What is that? Let me quickly give a little lesson on that. Oxidative stress is probably what most researchers would say is the number one cause of aging of every tissue in your body, whether it's your skin, your heart, your lungs, your brain. Oxidative stress. What is that? Well, there's certain molecules called free radicals that are formed as a result of normal metabolism and living, and they lack an electron, and they go and grab an electron And when they do that, they tear tissues up. So the way to quench them is by giving them an electron, and that's the protective mechanism that's there for your brain. Things that help donate an electron and quench that free radical damage, keep that from happening. I like to use the analogy of that Bugs Bunny character, the Tasmanian devil. Remember that guy just whirls around tearing up your tissues, in this case, the brain? He's like the free radical. And the thing that quenches that, gives that oxygen, is just Bugs Bunny not getting upset about it. He just kind of chills out, leans back, eating a carrot, and says, "What's up, Doc?" We need that antioxidant. And in this case, the major antioxidants are vitamin A, C, E, the trace mineral selenium. And we enhance and protect and facilitate the use of these antioxidant brain protecting chemicals with GHK copper peptide. That's what's meant by preventing oxidative stress. See, oxygen is good when you use it in moderation and you need oxygen. You quit breathing for about 3 minutes and see how you feel. You need oxygen. But when you take oxygen and remove an electron from it, it becomes free radical oxygen. It can do damage too. And rapid oxidation is it's really rusting. When a car rusts or a metal rusts, it combines with oxygen. And when it does it rapidly, it's burning. Like if you ever seen a page, if you threw a page into a fire, it's a white page and you see it turns yellow, dark yellow, real dark yellow, then brown, and then black. That's rapid oxidation, burning. Well, the same thing is happening in your brain, and the thing that prevents it is antioxidants protecting against oxidative stress. And this study shows that GHK copper peptide protects against that oxidative stress, which then protects against degenerative conditions of aging. So to fight brain aging, make sure you've got GHK copper peptide functioning the way it should in your brain, Dr. Stacy.
I love it. Thank you, Dr. Don. So with these next two slides, we're just going to kind of sum up a little bit here. Obviously, the causes, according to allopathic medicine, would say genetic mutations, environmental factors. But I think the big key thing here, Dr. Don, is despite decades and decades of research, they really don't have much to offer for prevention or treatment in allopathic medicine.
Right. Well, allopathic medicine has a philosophy, and this is, you're near and dear to my heart here because I am an allopath. I was degreed in allopathic medicine as an MD, and I was taught what allopaths are taught, and I was taught disease care. When I went to medical school, I didn't know there was such a thing. I just thought doctors learned how to keep people healthy. That's healthcare. But I learned really allopathic medicine has morphed into almost completely disease care versus healthcare, which is what we're teaching about tonight, which I keep harping on and saying over and over: learn to relax, get to bed on time, exercise, fresh air, sunshine, eating a God-made food diet, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, white if you choose meat, and then drink what you're mostly made of. Water makes your health complete. That is healthcare. And along with those foundational things, which you should be aware of every one of those, and helping make your lifestyle turn in the direction of supporting those areas. But we can also do specific things now that are natural things that just enhance your body's ability to get and stay healthy and restore and renew itself. We literally have regenerating cells in our body, and you lose about 50% of those by the time you're 35. You lose about 90% by the time you're 65. But we have found a way to restore numbers and function of these regenerative cells. How do you do it? With something called GHK copper peptide. So that's another powerful reason to make sure you are enhancing and supporting your body's ability to make and release GHK copper peptide.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Don, again, this is just a little, just another little way to kind of summarize some of the key things you've talked about here. But let's hit a little bit on inflammation, if you don't mind, talking a little bit about I know we mentioned that in the very first one, but that inflammatory process, we're going to hear more about that next week as
Yes.
well too. But we hit on the last two down here? Because we talked
Yeah,
a little
we
bit about
can.
oxidative stress, but
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to do. And now inflammatory conditions, there's many of them of the brain. There's hundreds, there's dozens at least. And the major ones that people are familiar with and are most common would be things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and MS. And once again, we're not saying we're treating these
no.
things. We're not making diagnosis or treatment or any claims. I'm just telling you what the chronic inflammatory conditions of the brain are: Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS, and there's many others. And that's something that we can do something about. And let me just give you a quick lesson on inflammation. Inflammation is not a bad thing. In fact, it's a wonderful thing. It's a necessary thing. It's an essential thing for health. Inflammation simply means attention the body's giving an area by increasing blood flow, number one. That's why it gets red when you cut yourself, say, on your skin. It'll bring in more blood flow that looks red. The blood is red, bringing in oxygen to help to give nutrients to the area. White cells come in to fight infection. Nutrition, vitamins, minerals, electrolytes come to help restore and rebuild the area. And your hand, the cut, is repaired due to acute inflammation, increased blood flow. That's good. But if inflammation is chronic and it's ongoing, like if that just kept going, once the cut was repaired, if you just kept inflaming that area, it would start to damage the tissue. That's what we mean by chronic inflammation. Those are the enemies of your brain. A chronic inflammatory process, this is what contributes to or causes, some researchers would say, Alzheimer's, MS, Parkinson's, you name many of those brain conditions. So how do we keep the brain from chronic inflammation? Well, you know what I'm going to say. Learn to relax, get to bed on time, do your exercise, breathe pressure, stay hydrated, eat God-made foods, but also neuroprotective factors, enhance neuroprotective factors in your brain. That means keep inflammation down with, in this case, GHK copper peptide. That's one of the things that it does is protects against these kinds of processes by supporting brain function and keeping the brain from aging prematurely, keeping neurons talking to one another, keeping the pathways strong, keeping the cabling that allows you to think and rethink and remember and recall things strong. And GHK copper peptide helps protect nerves to do that and keep inflammation from being chronic. We need a little bit of acute inflammation in the brain. We need blood flow there. If there's a stroke, for example, you better get some inflammation there on a short-term basis and start cleaning things up and bringing some oxygen in and bringing some white cells to fight infection and bringing some nutrients to repair and make new cells in that area. We need that. But if it's chronic, that's going to cause long-term sequela, we call it, from a stroke, whether it be if you can't talk, you can't think, you can't speak, whatever it may be. So we want that acute inflammation. It's going on all the time on a small scale basis, but in balance. When it gets drawn out and overgrown, it's chronic inflammation, and that contributes to these diseases of degeneration of the brain. And GHK copper has, as the last sentence here says, anti-inflammatory properties that can help reduce acute phase inflammatory cytokines. What are those? Those are damaging chemicals if they stay too long and too strong. They're absolutely essential, and your body brings them in to start repairing and actually tearing down dead cells and removing them. But if they stay too long and too strong, they're going to do more damage than it would if they didn't show up. So once again, we're trying to strike that balance, and that's what GHK copper peptide helps your brain do and your body do to balance with its anti-inflammatory properties. There's one thing you don't want your brain to be, and that's chronically inflamed.
Absolutely not. So, Dr. Don, let's shift gears a little bit here and talk about copper. Now, we know homeostasis is balance, But let's talk about copper and the importance of copper in the brain and in the body, and how this impacts. So we're going to get into this in the next couple slides, how this is going to impact these neurodegenerative processes that happen in the brain if something's out of balance.
Yes, copper is an amazing, amazing element. In fact, and it doesn't say this on any of these slides, but copper is antimicrobial, just like silver is. And we use colloidal silver to fight infections naturally instead of antibiotics, actually.
Yeah, we do too.
And colloidal copper works the same way. And that's a wonderful benefit of copper. But it's specifically in this to protect against brain degradation and bring balance to the brain. It does it by being, first of all, it's got to be, copper can't just free float alone in the body. It's got to be hooked up to a protein that allows it to be transported. And then it's distributed by a network of proteins and enzymes and to its do all the functions that it does. And the brain has a very high requirement for copper because there's so much activity. Just like the brain uses most of the oxygen in the body, but it's just, 3 pounds, but it uses 25% of the oxygen because it's so active. It uses most of the copper too. So you've got to have copper on board to have proper brain function. And certainly excess or deficiency of copper can negatively impact brain function. Excess would be very uncommon, but deficiency can happen. And there are certain foods, as we'll see here in a minute, that can make sure you've got a minimum level of copper. And by the way, GHK copper peptide, that's one of those proteins that transports copper around. It's one of the benefits, one of the ways it works. And you need copper for this whole mechanism that we're talking about, for even enhancing these regenerating cells in your body that you lose 50% of when you're 35 and 90% of when you're 65. You've got to have the signaling molecule that wakes them up, which is called GHK copper peptide. If there's no copper, it's just GHK, and it's not GHK copper peptide, and it does not perform all those wonderful functions that we've already spoken that GHK copper peptide does. So it does this, and it does so many other things. If copper deficiency, for example, can give you neurologic symptoms, like numbness and weakness and problems thinking and all this. How do we make sure we get enough copper in our diet? Well, I'm glad you asked, and we've given you the top 10 foods here where you can get copper. Number one, not so common, but my mom and I love these: oysters, a great source of copper and zinc, by the way. And then shiitake mushrooms, love mushrooms, are so loaded with essential nutrients, including copper. Tofu. Number 4 is sweet potatoes. We always choose sweet potatoes, better choice than the white potatoes. And then sesame seeds. I love sesame seeds. I get that on my Ezekiel bread. And then cashews. I love cashews. Chickpeas. That's what hummus is made of. So the Middle Eastern people are a step ahead of us there. Why maybe they've got a little advantage in the brain area because they eat a lot of hummus. We started eating a lot more of it. Salmon, it's got essential fatty acids as well as copper in it, so you're hitting on both cylinders there. And then dark chocolate, there's a fun one, right? So you want to make sure you're getting enough copper. Just have a square of dark chocolate and take your time with it and enjoy it. And it's got less sugar in it too, dark chocolate. So that's,
what's amazing, Dr. Don? If you make chickpea hummus with dark chocolate and then use organic, of course, strawberries to dip in that chickpea dark chocolate hummus, I promise you. Have you ever had chocolate hummus?
Oh my gosh, Dr. Stacy, if you do this anymore, you're going to be so smart, nobody even be able to understand you anymore. You probably make that, don't you? You probably eat it daily. That's why you're so
I love it. It's so good. It's so good. I love dark chickpea.
And then the last one, I think, is my favorite food. I've been asked this many times. What if you just were stuck on an island and you can only have one food? What would it be? I think it would be avocados. Avocados have essential fatty acids, which is very rare in a vegetable. They're loaded with fiber. They're loaded with vitamins and minerals. And I love avocados, and they also have copper in them. So, and nuts, we didn't have any. Well, yeah, we had cashews, but you know, I love for the brain the walnut. Walnut looks like your brain, and I think that God put a clue in there that they're healthy for your brain. And pecans the same way, but cashews are actually the highest in copper. So nuts, mushrooms, green leafy vegetables, you can never get too many of those. Seafood, especially salmon, and then dark chocolate for fun. Make sure you've got enough copper on board, and then your GHK copper peptide can actually function.
Yep, just one little square of dark chocolate a day or a handful of nuts a day. I'm never doing oysters. It's a no for me. I know those are Laura's favorite too. Anytime we go to a restaurant, she's like, "Whoa, let's get the oysters."
Try them baked, Rockefeller. You got to try it. You'd like it.
I don't know. I tried one in my lifetime. It was in Barcelona a few months ago, and I was like, "Oh, no. Let me chase this down with something really quickly." But let's talk a little bit about why, again, copper is so necessary, and keeping in mind that we're not talking about copper peptide. This is copper, which is part of that process. So remember, peptides are proteins, right? They're chains of amino acids, like the building blocks of your body. But GHKCU is copper peptide. But we're talking about copper homeostasis here because you can see when you start looking into the research in degenerative types of issues with the brain that this is a huge component of that.
Yes, there is a pathway called the cytochrome C oxidase pathway, and copper is a cofactor in that pathway. And this is a mitochondrial enzyme that drives energy production. So who doesn't want that? It's essential at the cellular level for energy to have copper there. So copper metabolism is so important in energy production. That's a good enough reason. But also, there are cells around your brain cells. They're not neurons, but they're called glial cells. They're supportive cells that protect, maintain, and help neurons to work. And they keep cross-linking from happening. Sometimes in something like MS, you get cross-linking where a neuron talks to one it shouldn't be talking to, and that can lead to some of the symptoms and confusion there. And these glial cells are there to protect against that. And copper is a very important part of that neuro anti-inflammatory benefit, or supporting glial cells that support the nerve cells themselves. So to put energy in your brain and to protect against, to really fortify those glial cells, those supportive cells that keep neurons working properly and not cross-linking and confusing, talking to the wrong neurons, keep them talking to the right neurons. That's what these supporter and helper cells, glial cells, do. So a couple of huge benefits that copper allows us to do for our brain.
All right, so let's make this connection then with actual copper and with copper peptide. Let's talk a little bit about that, Dr. John.
Okay, well, copper does a number of things just by itself. Like I said, it's antimicrobial, it fights infections, it helps a number of enzymes, just elemental copper being there. But when you hook it onto specific peptides, it does specific things. And I think the most important copper peptide, certainly the most important one I'm aware of, is a tripeptide, 3 amino acid, very small signaling molecule, GHK copper peptide, which does a number of things. But the one thing that it does that, and it's the reason I will not go a day without my patches, without my X39, without my Eon patch, because I want that signaling molecule to be functioning and to be released in my body and enhanced and supported. And that's what this photobiomodulation, wearable light therapy, is clinically studied to do, Dr. Stacy. And there's the connection right there. And you say, well, how does it do that? there's no GHK copper peptide in the patch. No, there is not. There are no chemicals passing from the patch into your body. That's why we call it non-transdermal. It simply is using your body as a battery. It picks up the infrared energy of your body and hits the matrix of the patch, which is a matrix of organic amino acids in a stereoisomer configuration, crystalline lattice that takes infrared and forms a wavelength of light, which is in turn signaling GHK copper peptide. That process, although it sounds rather complicated, it's the same thing that happens when the sun hits your skin. It's light hitting the skin, making vitamin D. That's photobiomodulation. Photo, light, bio, the body, modulation, changing the body. Light changes the body. And this is just taking advantage of that process. That is the patented, what makes this a biotech company. David Schmidt, the inventor of this, had that idea when he was thinking about the sun hitting the body. He thought if we could specifically get the right wavelength of light and reflect it back in the body, that maybe we could have some benefits. And that's when the research started on the patches, and patches have different signaling molecules, but the essential one that we've talked a lot about tonight is GHK copper peptide. And that one, that's where David Schmidt was so excited when he finally, after $4 million of his own money and 10 years of research, found the patch that was ready for clinical study to see if it would make that link and actually help this signaling molecule to wake up rejuvenating cells. And he did it. And it's called, if I may say so, X39.
Yes, yes. And I love that this peptide is, like you said earlier, smart technology, right? This peptide is smart. It knows what to do. And so it's going to make everything happen at the appropriate intercellular locations so that it's not allowed to accumulate toxic in any one area. So it's because we know GHK declines as we age. That's where you see that degeneration, the body's ability to make these smart decisions to do what is appropriate inside of the brain declines. Right. And so when you got your copper peptides on board and they're working like they did when you were younger, because we do not see 10-year-olds with neurodegenerative issues in their brain, right? It just doesn't happen because all these peptides are present and they're doing all the processes that we've talked about. That's huge to make sure that that's keeping it going.
It is. And, Dr. Stacy, as you say this, I'm getting enlightened in something that's even as important as what you're saying. That is in a physical proximity. It's smart technology. In other words, it knows where to go physically in your body to help the areas. That's what makes it smart technology. But also it prioritizes what's most important. In other words, you might have something going on in your body you don't even know about because it hasn't had any physical manifestations or symptoms, or you haven't had any diagnosis made, but bad things are happening all the time. That's not, bad news. That's just the truth. That's accurate. But this smart technology knows how to prioritize and go after the important things first, and then go to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And that is probably the most challenging thing to me. I'm so excited about the power of patching, patchingpower.com. I love it because that says it all. And I'm so excited about that. But the most challenging part about it is that convincing people you don't know when something's going to happen. I know what happens on a cellular level, and the patches aren't on trial. They enhance signaling molecules and they do all these wonderful things. I just don't know when you're going to experience something in a certain area that you'll notice. Most of the time, Dr. Stacy, people tell me the first thing they notice is just a general sense of well-being or sleeping improvements. I hear that a lot. Then I hear energy enhancement, but not a jittery energy, just a more youthful, more alert, requiring less sleep, actually, and just feeling better, more young feeling. I hear a lot about skin changes. Tissues that turn over faster tend to have a quicker noticing effect. Like you get a new liver every 6 weeks, you get new cells lining your GI tract in your stomach every 3 to 5 days because of the high acid content there. So different tissues renew at different rates. But depending on what's going on in your body, it's smart technology in terms of location and in terms of prioritization. It'll go after the most important things first. So we just really need to educate people. Don't be discouraged. It's recommended, and the patches are clinically studied to be used 1 month for every decade of life. So I'm 67. That means I've lived 6 decades. I'm in my 7th. So I've got to use these for 7 months before I even make a decision whether or not it's happening. Now, most of the time, you're going to notice something. 90% of the people on the bell curve are going to notice something in 3 to 6 weeks. But you might be one of those few percent on one end that it takes 6 months, but you might be one of the few percent that it takes 6 days or 6 minutes. You could be a one wonder. Isn't that wonderful? I don't know on an individual basis how quickly it's going to do it. I do know what it is doing. It's clinically studied. It's safe, it's effective, and it's affordable. For the kind of technology we're talking about right here, if this patch was $100 a day, Dr. Stacy, I promise you, I would be telling people to use it, and I'd be using it myself. At least for a few months, I'd find a way. But it's not. It's $3 a day. $3 a day, and then the supporting anti-inflammatory patch, $2 a day. Wow, $5 a day, and I can get these benefits. People waste that on a cup of coffee. Why not quit putting toxins in, intoxicating, and start detoxing? We'll put the patches on. I will tell you this: patches, no patch, including the X39, my favorite patch, will not work unless you wear them. That's all I got to say about that.
I love they do not work unless you put them on your body. That is so true. And I do want to share with you real quickly before we finish up here with these last 2 slides. When we looked last week at our clinical studies that we did with the X39 in the brain, you could start to see some changes and shifts in the EEGs around 3 weeks. But really, the most significant thing started to happen at that 6-week mark. So if someone's saying, when am I going to notice some effects in my brain, memory, energy, focus, concentration, clarity, or even some of these things improving, give it at least a solid 6 weeks before you even think about forming an opinion. And then, like you said earlier, time, right? 1 month for every decade you are old. And if this has been chronic, if this has been going on for a while, we're looking at even, longer time. So we're going to wrap up tonight real quick, just kind of going a little bit over here on the antioxidant effects in these different types of issues with, of course, how GHK copper peptide can improve that. And then we'll wrap up with just the latest little bit of research here for the evening, Dr. Don.
Yes, the oxidative damage is definitely a contributor, if not the major player, in Parkinson's, in Alzheimer's, in dementia, both pre-senile and senile dementia, in Huntington's disease, in so many brain issues, just memory loss and not being able to take long-term and putting it into, or short-term memory into long-term memory, which is usually the first thing that goes. All of these are negatively affected by oxidative damage. And the protector that we have for that is our antioxidants, vitamin A, C, E, the trace mineral selenium. And copper peptide, GHK copper peptide, passes that blood-brain barrier and gives that antioxidant protective effect to protect your brain against aging. The most important organ to protect against aging, for sure, is your brain. And if you have a brain, you need to be putting X39 on your neck, mighty close to your brain. That's my opinion. I'm sticking to it, Dr. Stacy.
I love it. Absolutely. Me too. And I want to highlight here, because we're going to talk next week a little bit more into some other patches with LifeWave. But copper peptides do stimulate the production of glutathione. We know it's going to elevate your glutathione over 30%. Now, obviously, our patch does way more than that. But look at this, what the research is showing that glutathione does to neutralize that ROS and protect against that oxidative damage. That probably has a pretty significant impact on our brain, too.
It's so significant that I'm going to tell you this right now. I would not miss next week, because I'm going to tell you some things about glutathione, which is, boy, it's really becoming one of my all-time favorite patches. The more I learn about it, I've always been a big fan of glutathione, but let me tell you why next week. I'm not even going to get started on it, but I will tell you this, that the blue zones, the 5 areas in the world where people live consistently to 100 years of age and older, have the highest levels of glutathione. Why is that? Well, let's talk about it next week. Let's talk about how glutathione affects the brain health. And we've got a lot more to share with you. I'm very excited about it, Dr. Stacy, and thank you for allowing me this platform, and looking forward to it. Maybe next week we can get done quicker and take some questions.
Oh, I'm sure. Tonight, though, Dr. Donna, this is a huge issue for people. It really is. We all have parents and grandparents and people in our lives that are dealing with these types of things. And, it's really important that people see that there is something else out there, because, like you said, allopathic medicine says, I'm going to take this pill or that, or it's just part of life. You're just going to have to deal with it. And we can see here that the studies that have been conducted over the years, as you saw one of them from PubMed, they're showing that there are a lot of beneficial effects. Antioxidant and anti-inflammatory, neuroprotective effects, crossing that blood-brain barrier with elevating GHK. And I don't know about you, but I don't personally want to use a needle and inject myself with GHK every single day. That's your only other alternative to elevate that peptide, because it declines as you age. And so by activating it with your own body's light, it's just
and you cannot inject that in your brain, by the way. Don't try this at home. So you want brain benefits, you're going to have to put on that X39 that stimulates that signaling molecule. That's what it's clinically studied to do. That's what David Schmidt has brought to the table, and literally changed the reverse aging science of the future. Created, I would say, a big part of the reverse aging science of the future, and really enhanced healthcare. I'm so excited about living long and strong. And we've got a lot more to share. Next week, we'll do that. Thank you, Dr. Stacy, and we'll see you all then.
Thank you, Dr. Don. For those of you, I know we had a lot of questions in the chat, and we didn't get to those tonight, but I think by our presentation, by all the information that Dr. Don shared tonight, I think you could put the dots together and determine that no matter what was put in that chat, that this technology has the ability to be able to help you improve your quality of life, improve your brain health. So thank you, Dr. Don, for taking the time to be on here again tonight. We're looking forward to seeing you again next Tuesday as we dive deeper into your glutathione, as well as a couple of the other LifeWave patches to be able to look at the brain health and how we can best maximize that. So thank you all for being here this evening.
Thank you. Put this gain on your brain.